Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is Prey, developed by Arkane Studios and published by Bethesda. It's a horror action title much like in the vein of Dead Space, but very different in content. It takes a lot of inspirations from System Shock as well as Dishonored and Bioshock titles. It's a bit of a mishmash of mechanical complexities and ideas that fit extremely well together. But it's not perfect, and there's a couple of nitpicks I'd like to point out as we go along. Before we dive into gameplay proper, I'm going to take a look at the options menu and talk a little bit about PC performance and PC settings. As always, there's an annotation in the description below sending you to the segment you might want to see in regards to options or gameplay. Options wise, the game is mostly complete. There is a couple of missing things here in the advanced settings for video options, and those are the FOV slider as well as the ability to disable blur. Now both of these can be achieved using a .ini change outside of the game, and there's plenty of guides if you simply Google that and how you can do that. The fact of the matter though is it's not in the game, so that's fairly annoying. Especially the FOV, which is set at 85, is fairly tight and quite constrained for most people, and if you're like me, it actually causes headaches when played too long, so changing that to a higher FOV is definitely recommended. It doesn't break anything, it works fine, and the developers have said that they are going to patch in a FOV slider as soon as they can down the line. The second thing that slightly annoys me is obviously the inability to change motion blur. Again, you can do that in the .ini file, but not in the game. And motion blur is one of those things I prefer not to have existed at all in most games, because it doesn't provide anything except covering for shitty texture work. And honestly, Prey doesn't need that. The texture work is damn well fantastic. Overall, the performance for Prey is great. On my machine, it runs a stable 90 to 100 FPS on almost max settings, and if you have a higher end machine, you can run 120 FPS at any given time, no problem. There's a couple of spots here and there when the game suddenly dips when it needs to load in a new area or launch a bunch of objects at the same time, especially in very hectic, particle effects heavy moments. But when we're talking about dips, we're talking about 120 dip to 80, not a 60 dip to 20. So it's not a big issue at all in the vast majority of situations during gameplay. One note I'd like to make about audio is that while the music, speech and effects volume sliders are separate, there is no master volume slider, and the in-game audio is a bit of a fiddly beast. And some situations the background noise suddenly spikes up in volume and intensity, like somebody's trying to shoot you from behind with a six-sided rocket, but all that there is a desk with an email you haven't read. Or there's a mimic hiding around the corner and it builds this sort of suspenseful music, but the atmosphere just isn't there because everything is well lighted. And you're looking at a mimic through your scope and you see it's there, so there's no real suspense, even though the music tries to convey it is. The last thing about the audio is that there are some issues with dialogue options and voice volume in dialogue options, and it sometimes appears to break for no particular reason. And this is an ongoing trend with Arkane games in general, is that they are not well optimized, and Prey is excellently optimized compared to Dishonored 2, but there are still a couple of issues here and there with some UI issues, stuck cursors on screen, a couple of issues here and there with interactive objects. It's not the end of the world, but there are enough small minor issues that it becomes apparent. It doesn't impede gameplay, it doesn't break anything, but it's definitely there. Overall, gameplay and interactive options are pretty complete, and one of the things I really enjoy about the UI design, I'll get into that in a little bit, is the ability to focus on a particular screen or keypad or fabricator and just look into that exclusively without having to move into a different separate submenu of the UI. It's still interactive in the overall world, or you can focus in on that and then use things like your keypad on your keyboard to type in codes. It's fairly excellent UI design overall, and I really like it. Controls are fully rebindable, no issues whatsoever in this regard. It even has support for the Steam controller, though obviously it doesn't have, which is fairly par for the course, controller rebinding available in the game. Now why you would play a FPS title on a controller is beyond me, but you can, so there you go. As I said earlier, the game supports FPS up to 120 or 144 locked, which you can unlock if you want to with a .ini file. I would have liked to see that option in the game so you can lock it to your preferred FPS. That is not available, it just locks to whatever is native for your monitor if you have VSync enabled. That is so far is the PC performance and everything related to that. Overall very stable, a very solid PC build, with a few minor bugs I hope I ironed out fairly fast with a couple of patches. As we dive into gameplay, the first thing I'd like to note is that I want to avoid any spoilers I can, but this is fairly impossible in a content-dense game as Prey. So I will be only looking at a minor side quest and just exploring randomly through the world, but you will see some interesting mechanics and things that are unlocked during gameplay. So if you want to avoid every spoiler, I'm not even sure why you're watching a review with video content in it, but keep in mind I'm trying to minimize them as best I can. So having said that, the first things we want to talk about in Prey is level design and gameplay complexity, because holy hell is it well crafted. It mostly reminds me of Dark Souls, in fact, with its labyrinthine combination of levels, shortcuts, interconnected pathways and gates that you can unlock during gameplay to speed up different sections of the game or even traversing different segments of the game world. The game runs around a central foyer hub in this Talos 1 space station, and while you slowly unlock different areas and different segments such as the crew huts and the machines and the storage and stuff like that, each segment is also interconnected with every other segment. So to get from the foyer to the cargo bay, you may have to go through 3 different areas, or you can skip straight on ahead using, for example, an outside area by doing a moonwalk or spacewalk. It's an excellent set of world building and an excellent set of level design that really allows the game to feel extremely alive. It also really does a great job of conveying the difficulty and danger of having all these enemies in different areas. Because while a mimic you may have killed in the voyeur will not appear there again, obviously he's dead, because of the interconnectivity of the levels, it's not unheard of for a mimic to show up in a new area by traversing the level. And even though the game obviously spawns them anew in that area, it doesn't feel strange to come across a new set of mimics down the line as you progress, because you have unlocked new areas. So while you can move about more freely through the world, so can the mimics. It's an excellent set of mechanics that really sets the tone for the entire game by allowing you to both feel a sense of tension, a sense of danger while exploring, while also allowing you to optimize your gameplay route through the entire game. It never sort of stifles you and tells you, oh, now go back to that one other level 20 minutes back and traverse all these other extra rooms in a very specific pattern. No, if you've done your job well, you've done the side quests you need to unlock these areas, you've explored a little bit, maybe even found a few secret passages, then it's a fairly easy exercise to get from A to B to C, even skipping D through F to get to G. It's an excellent level design overall, no complaints whatsoever. The note here though is that not only is it excellently well designed in terms of levels and overall pacing of the levels, it's also content dense. Most games in this type of world have a very rich world, but they are very light on content, because most of the ideas went into designing these levels and not filling in with interesting stuff to do. Prey does a fantastic job of combining secrets, locations and hidden areas, side objectives and quests, sub-objectives, just cool things to find in the world overall, cool things to see everywhere. Every room is basically a puzzle in on itself, and not really a puzzle to escape, but there's multiple entrances, there's multiple exits. Sometimes these exits only become apparent after you may have already completed the level, or unlocked a specific skill or ability that in a different playthrough you might never even have available. A good example here is the ability to morph into one of these mimic cups or a chair or something like that using the special psionic powers you unlock eventually. But if you don't unlock these powers, certain rooms from a certain direction or a certain method may be inaccessible. In a particular moment, I used the ability to change into a chair to crawl under a certain area because I was smaller than my human shape and get into a hidden room that you could only otherwise access by finding a specific corpse. So by using my abilities, I was able to unlock a specific room much earlier in the campaign, much earlier in the game, than I was otherwise going to be able to if I didn't have that ability. And the game accounts for this, allowing you to unlock abilities, unlock weapons, unlock different types of subquests and side objectives. It does not shy away from giving you extra tools and rewarding you for your exploration and secret finding. A very, very well crafted world and overall content design. A good example is getting, for example, the shotgun. You may come across the shotgun after 3 or 4 hours of gameplay once you finally get across a shotgun literally lying on the ground. But there is a way to unlock a shotgun in under the first half hour of gameplay if you find the proper secret pathways while exploring. Excellent story as well as excellent level design do tie into this. While I'm a great fan of the story in general, the game does lose a few points here. Most because it doesn't seem to be able to contain that tension, that level of intense mystery that sort of surrounds the entire game around its main story. Because of the way you explore the world, and all the secret levels and all the secret areas you can unlock, the game seems to be able to lose some of its focus when it goes to the main story. Because of the way lighting works and because of the art style and overall design work, while you're exploring the world freely, you're not doing any of the main objectives or you're not progressing forward directly in a linear path to the end game, you end up not having as much tension, not mystery, none of that horror feel. In fact, it feels much more like Dishonored or Bioshock does than it does a horror title such as Outlast. Not a bad thing at all in my opinion, But when the main objectives then come along, the main story missions, they try to create this tension, this mystery, all these pre-scripted events such as light staggering or enemies spawning or massive things exploding here and there. It just doesn't have the same oomph as if it would do if the rest of the game tried to contain that same level of tension. And that is a bit of a negative to the pacing as well as the story narrative of the game. If you can overlook this minor issue in regards to the story, it is overall very well put together. No real complaints in that. The voice acting in itself, in the story and the various audio logs you find and everything the game sort of conveys and informs you with is also very well put together. And I keep saying it's well put together because it really is. You'll find an audio log that gives you a hint in regards to the location of a different person. That different person might give you a hint to the location of a safe. And that safe may yet again contain a new item such as an EMP bomb that you've not had the access to before. You might find schematics for crafting or recycling. And there's a variety of ways to unlock every single object, ability, and objective in the game. Truly an excellent set of non-linear designs overall. So it's a bit of a shame then that the story not only loses a little bit of the tension because of this non-linearity, but it also focuses on a very linear way forward with the game. Now, while the game's story does have different influences on the world, depending on the abilities you take, the sort of quests you do, and the sort of actions you unlock, the people you save or kill, and everything related to that, actual story narrative still feels very stilted and straightforward. Now, this doesn't mean the game has one ending and one linear path forward. As far as I know, there's at least half a dozen endings to the game in a variety of different ways based on your abilities and your interaction with the world. But even then, everything moving forward still feels very driven into a very specific goal. And even in the case that is not the case, it still feels that way. So that's a bit of a negative to the title. Overall though, even taking away the core focus of a singular path forward with the story, the game has an excellent sense of direction in terms of its side objectives, very well put together side objectives in general that allow you to sort of freely explore the world step by step. And while on some end you might get frustrated because you can't get into a room or a segment while trying to do a side objective you've just earned, the fact of the matter is that there's probably a way for you to get in that segment if you sort of explore and look around and try to find different alternative pathways. You might not have the access to a keypad to get into a secure room, but maybe you can transform into a cup and roll under the door. Maybe there is a maintenance shaft somewhere. Maybe you can shoot out the glass window and get in there. Maybe there's a way to go around and out inside the room using a mimic, for example, or tracking a turret. There's a variety of different ways of getting anywhere, doing everything, even when you feel frustrated that the game tries to lock you out by saying, oh, you don't have this ability, you can't get here. It never really does that. Having said that, a lot of the design of the world depends on the graphics and overall atmosphere of sound and visual quality. And again here, the quality is overall very excellent. Though I have to say that for a horror game or a suspenseful game, there is not a lot of things that made me think, oh no, it's dangerous, oh no, I have to be afraid here. Yes, the occasional bout of darkness where I have to use my special camera mask to see, or the electric arcs or mimics spawning all of a sudden are in the corner with a suspenseful set of music does trigger a bit of a jump scare here and there. But in general, the cheerful tone of the game, the very good lighting, overall colorful graphics, while excellent, don't make me suspenseful. What they do make me is very intrigued into the world. Because the game tries to create this duality between very stylized, futuristic, almost mirror edge-like tech, where everything is clean, everything is stylized, everything is surgically precisely built and engineered to be excellent and very tight. And then you have the combination with the mimics, where there are gore bits everywhere, there's trashed areas, there's explosive areas, there's cars lying on the ground that people have pushed aside as they ran away, there's corpses, there's blood, there's body parts, and you see a very pristine room in one area, and you'll see a similar room in a different area that's been torn to shreds by these mimics. And this duality really creates an interesting set of tones. Sure, there's areas that are obviously less infected, less attacked, and you also find different things in these areas. You also unlock different methods in these areas, as opposed to fairly destroyed areas where you're lurking around a corner and checking every certain cup to see whether or not it's not a mimic in disguise, because you expect to find enemies there. They've obviously infested that area heavily. It is not undone in any real way by the audio design. So that is probably my least favorite part of Prey in so far. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the composer, which is the same person that did the Doom soundtrack. The music taken in and of itself is excellent, but paired with the gameplay on occasion, it just doesn't seem to fit very well. I think a good example is if you're exploring a certain area and suddenly the music spikes up in a very tense, Crescendo, you expect to be attacked by enemies. You expect to come across a secret. You expect to come across something unique or interesting or something that might kill you or will progress the story. And on occasions, it's nothing more than a terminal that has an unread email. It's fairly frustrating that this keeps happening. The same really applies for combat, and the same really applies for as you progress through different areas. You can't ever really rely on the music itself. The game's sounds, such as movement of enemies, unlocking doors, explosions, guns, everything like that sounds phenomenal. But as for the music and the sort of tone it tries to set in the game world, it's excellent, but it often misses the mark slightly. A suspenseful moral tone where you're trying to sneak around a corner is really undone when there is a massive crescendo of music pounding in your ears, as if you're trying to play Doom, but you're not. You're a guy with a pistol, another guy dual-wielding shotguns that shoot fire. And that is definitely a bit of a shame in regards to the music. It really does drive away a little bit of the tension you might expect from a title because it doesn't fit that well. Thankfully, the game sounds make up a ton for that. The guns feel great, though I don't like the sound the pistol makes. It's a very light, piffy sound, though yes, it's a silenced pistol. That doesn't mean it sounds like a Pop-Tart. And other guns like that are excellently well put together, but there is a couple of misses here like the pistol. Overall sound design for guns, excellent. Even guns that don't really have a sound you'd expect them to make, like the glue gun, even then it feels like a heavy gun booming, forming something forward that sticks on stuff. It's not heavy like a rocket, but you know there's some pound to it and there's some actual effect, some suction getting sucked out of that tube that chews the glue. Even when they've figured something out that doesn't exist in reality, Arkane have been able to create a very excellent approximation of what people expect to hear when they see the type of item you have in your hands. It goes for EMP bombs, it goes for the psychic bombs, it goes for everything like that. Excellent. The same goes for sound design in terms of the enemies attacking and visual designs of enemies attacking. As they morph side to side and sort of teleport around the room, the nearly insane sounds they make just assault your psyche if you're not even sure what is going on with them jumping left and right and being able to reposition extremely fast. You sort of get sucked into the game thinking, holy hell, what is going on? How are these things alive? How am I not dead after I pump them full of shotgun shells? Excellent well set combat control as well as overall feel when combat starts. So that brings me then to the actual gameplay progression. How do you unlock abilities? How do you get to stuff? And what does that mean for the gameplay and story? So as I said, you unlock abilities as you deem fit, and these abilities have a definite result in how you interact with the world. An example, for example, is turrets that scan for any effect of the aliens in you, and if you take a lack of psychic abilities, they might start to attack you because they expect you're one of the aliens and not a human. It's these minor things that you notice initially, but they do stage forward into more massive things. Massive scanners and decontamination units that might prevent you from opening a door if you have too many psychic abilities. They sort of detect you're kind of this alien thing. What are you doing? And it allows for a very cool idea. Then not only are you unlocking abilities to progress and do other stuff, like I said, being able to transform into a cup or a chair so you can get into rooms you otherwise couldn't, you also have to think about how the world reacts to you in general, such as turrets and enemies and AI and everything like that. Overall, I really like this because it creates more organic progression paths forward, not just thinking, oh, I have a better ability to shoot guns, or I can upgrade this kind of thing, I have more inventory space. There's definitely these abilities as well, and you unlock them as you progress further in gameplay. You get these neuromod items, and you can use those to unlock different abilities. And you can even craft these neuromod items provided you have the crafting ingredients to do so. And depending on how you unlock abilities and what you have available, you can unlock things for security, such as better shooting of guns, the ability to repair turrets, the ability to hack, get into doors you otherwise might not be able to get into. But as you come across more enemies and more enemy types, step by step, you can scan these enemies, learn more about their abilities and their weaknesses, which you don't know beforehand, how to defeat them. Are they weak to EMP? Are they weak to shotguns? Are they weak to fire? All these extra things you learn, you can unlock by scanning enemies. But as you scan enemies, you also learn how to use some of those same abilities. And you can use your same upgrade system with your neural implants to get those abilities. Just the ability to take over turrets, to fight for you, the ability to shoot faster, run faster, the ability to hide from enemies. There's a bunch of different abilities that you unlock slowly as you progress through the game by scanning enemies. This also means you have to be a little bit careful. If you're trying to scan an enemy that's attacking you, you might die before you complete your scan. And some enemies are pretty rare, which means you may have to find around the game world to figure out all these different enemy types so you can unlock the abilities associated with them. Overall, again, it encourages exploration, it encourages you to go out into the world and figure stuff out. It encourages you to get off the beaten path and explore the game world in general. Now, while the game does have a bit of a tendency to throw a bunch of different enemies at you at any given times, most of the time, dealing with these enemies, even if you know their weaknesses, is not the end of the world. The vast majority of enemies can be silenced by simply using your glue gun as well as a pistol to the face a couple of dozen times. But once you come across 2, 3, 4, 5 enemies in the same room, and you have to deal with them in different ways, then the game really shines forward and shows its true colors in making sure it's very difficult. Because especially in the mid-game, once you've unlocked a certain set of abilities and you're getting comfortable in the way the game throws stuff at you, you get into sort of lull, where while enemies are technically stronger than you and they could kill you in a couple of hits, they never really get that chance because you're always a couple of steps ahead of them. You'll scan, you'll find out before they see you, you'll get them with a glue gun and then shoot them in the back of the head. There's a couple of different ways you can deal with enemies, and it never really feels like you're in danger. And suddenly it'll throw 2, 3, 4 different enemy types that have different kinds of weaknesses at you. And not only do you have to throw EMP, but maybe one of the enemies isn't even affected by EMP, while another needs a psychic bomb to be thrown at it, yet another set needs you to shoot a shotgun shell, and then the last one needs you to lock it with a glue gun before you can pound its head in with a wrench. These different varieties do create a mass amount of tension and require you to think while in combat, while also trying not to get shot in the head with a alien sentient tentacle. Combat design is excellent in this game again, and while that shouldn't be the focus of a horror game in my opinion, the fact that the game allows you to play in that manner, and it also allows you to play in a stealth-focused and more exploration-oriented and sneaky manner, does again show the excellence of the non-linear design of the game. Every step of the way, every room, every chamber, you make the choices you want to make and unlock your own gameplay progression through the story. Psychic abilities means you may have a difficult path with turrets, but going all physical means you may need to deal with certain enemies by not having these abilities that can affect them. Looking for certain corpses in the game while not having unlocked those areas might mean you need to be very creative in trying to figure out what's going on. Being creative and exploring early on or even later on can unlock you different upgrades, different abilities, and really create a massive spike in power compared to the rest of the game where you might be thinking you're a literal god walking amongst mere mortal aliens while you shotgun them in the face until the game sort of slaps you on the wrist and tells you, hey, I have these other guys and they shoot fireballs from space. Every step of the way, I was surprised. Every room, again, I felt a new thrill of discovery, both in terms of mechanical complexity as well as gameplay and design. And I immensely enjoyed my time with Prey. It's an excellent game and it's well worth a second playthrough once you've done with it to try to figure out how else the game could progress, how else you can find things, what else you can find in the game world, and how you're going to deal with them. So the last 2 points I'd like to note is the crafting system and inventory system, because I don't really have issues with this system, but there are a couple of points where I'm not the greatest fan. Now, on the best of days, I am not a great fan of inventory management. I feel inventory management is an archaic term that should not exist in current day games, outside of a few very specific things such as rising tension, limiting ammo capacity to make sure you don't get overpowered or stuff like that. There's a couple of reasons to limit certain things. But there is no fun or enjoyable gameplay in moving around boxes in your inventory left and right to make sure you have space for that other gun. And Prey does have a little bit of this. Thankfully, the game also tries to do away with this with the recycle system, where you can hand in different objects and different items in the game world to recycler to get base objects, which you then use to craft items. Now these items can be things like shotgun shells, they can be upgrade systems for your skill upgrades, and they can be health kits. Based on the schematics you find throughout the game, and again, you may find shotgun shells way early on as a schematic and never find a shotgun for the first few hours, or you could find health pack upgrades very early on, or maybe not at all if you don't go in the right areas and do the right side objectives. Non-linearity at its finest. But the way crafting works is you use recyclers, get base materials, and then you go through a fabricator, and then you use these base materials to craft different items. And there's 4 base materials, and by setting them in this fabricator, you select an object and you can create everything from that. Obviously, you need a lot of materials to craft everything except the most mundane stuff. So if you want to make the neuromod upgrade, you need a lot of organic materials and a lot of exotic materials, which you can only get really by killing a lot of mimics. Excellent overall progression that allows you to progress further your character, or get more shotgun shells, or if you want to be melee focused, maybe you don't need shotgun shells. Maybe you need more health packs or suit integrity upgrades. And there's a different variety of ways you can use this. These are spread throughout the game world, and while the hub world is always available, you can always come back there and use them there. There is a minor issue in that, especially in the early game, inventory space being so limited and you needing so many resources that you're trying to loot everything you can. And in certain situations, You may be halfway through a level, halfway through a room, and have to decide whether or not you're going to keep going and leave all this juicy stuff lying around you can use to upgrade your stuff, upgrade yourself later on, or turn back, get back to the hub area to then use the upgrade system there to get a couple of items and then coming back to the room, retreading the same area. And while the game does an excellent job in many areas of not making you feel like you're retreading the same area over and over, by quite intelligently spawning enemies or adding new pathways for you to explore or find, especially in the early game due to the inventory management, it's a annoying slog to go back and forth until you unlock the ability to upgrade your inventory space. Not a great fan of that. Thankfully, the crafting system is fairly simple, but because of the way you unlock schematics and unlock new ways to craft stuff, as well as the base limitations of what you can craft, being shotgun shells and all items that are just genuinely useful at all times to craft, it is not a bad system at all, and I can really recommend using that system to its fullest extent. So, in conclusion, Prey is an excellent action game with a unique story, a cool world, and a very interesting non-linear world and gameplay design. And I can wholeheartedly recommend this game to anyone that enjoys action games, that enjoyed Bioshock, that enjoyed System Shock, that enjoyed Dishonored, because they all borrow from the same base set of ideas. Prey does it so much better with several different paths all interacting to make the world change to your behavior. Excellent gameplay design. Performance is also excellent, no real complaints here, and while I do have some issues with the sound design and some issues with minor bugs in relation to sound and in relation to gameplay, they are definitely minor and can be overcome by simply changing a couple of .ini files in the case of FOV, or waiting on a patch or two for them to fix some of the minor issues I have with some of the UI blocking. None of those broke the game, none of those broke the save files, they are very minor comparative to the rest of the excellence that is the title. So as I said, I have no issue recommending Prey for anyone. It's an excellent title. The initial playthrough takes about 15 hours if you just rush the game, close to 30 hours if you try to do the side objectives, and it has an imminent set of replay value in both the non-linearity of trying to figure out everything else, as well as the general trying to complete the game overall. So I do strongly suggest you check out Prey. It came out a couple of days ago on Steam and is available for $60 or your regional equivalent from Arkane and Bethesda. And there's a link in the description down below if you are so interested. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, press that like button, leave a comment down below and tell us what you think of Prey, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.